From violence to incarceration to temporary paralysis, this podcast tells the story of how John Petrelli overcame tremendous obstacles to become a world renowned personal trainer. Hear from the man himself as he shares his journey from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs. You will be inspired by his resilience, motivated by his determination, and amazed by his incredible transformation. Join us for this powerful story of redemption, growth, and triumph. John, thank you so much for being here on Multispective. I really, really appreciate the time you've taken to be here with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having this platform. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to have a conversation with you and see if we can't give some information that can help people on their journey.
Awesome, John. Yeah, you have such an inspirational story, and I think our listeners are going to have so much to take away from this episode. Um, John, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background and where you're from?
Certainly. So at this point, uh, I've been a fitness trainer for 30 years, and I've gotten to travel the world and worked with celebrities and all that great stuff. But if we roll way back, I grew up in a small farm town. My parents are from Italy. I'm first generation Italian. My mom grew up in a little town in Naples, came across to America, and I came from a town of 2,300 people. Maybe there's probably even less people now. I worked in a horse barn. I mucked hay. I baled hay, mucked horse stalls. So I just say that because I want to give people perspective that there is distance in this journey, right? I was able to come from one place and go to another place through hard work, through consistency, through a lot of pitfalls, a lot of scrapes, a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Um, so I grew up in a small town. I had a childhood. God bless my mom. She's very loving Italian people. The culture itself is a lot of food, a lot of love. She really saved my life.
Right.
Now, I take full responsibility for things I did in my life at this point. At a certain point, I didn't. But my dad, God bless him, um, he only have, look, as parents, as teachers, we only have the tools we have, right? We can only, our journey that we come up with is different than everybody else's journey. So my dad's tools were a little bit different than my mom. He got married a little later. He was born in 1921. He was in World War II. He was in Korea and he was in Vietnam. And he was raised by the military. He didn't have a father. And when he had me, he didn't understand. Maybe it's something egotistical with men, definitely in that generation too, where we don't really express love or it's seen as a weakness. So
Mm,
my relationship with my dad was more like he raised me as a soldier as opposed to raising me as a son. Now,
right.
that's what the tools he had. I don't blame him at this point, but our relationship was a little tumultuous at points, and I had tremendous fear of my father. And that fear ended up manifesting itself in me in anger and then ultimately in violence. And so
Right.
as I grew up as a youth with testosterone and stuff, I started getting into a lot of violent confrontations, a lot of violence in fights in the streets. And the thing that changed my life, Jenica, was at 18, in a moments, literally in seconds, I got into an altercation with someone. I ended up striking them and I almost killed that individual. I hit them in the face. They went down, the back of their head hit the curb and it split open. And there was a huge melee in the streets and someone grabbed me from behind and I thought it was another individual trying to attack me. And I swung around to strike this person, defend myself with what I thought at the time. And there was a handcuff on my wrist. And it was an undercover cop that saw me strike this person. And so
Oh my
now I'm
God.
swinging, punching a cop, a police officer at 18 years old. So here I am living with this anger, living with this violence, not knowing how to deal with it, not being a strong enough individual to to have my own way and not be pressured by my peer group. I don't
Mm,
hold my peer group responsible. There were plenty of people that didn't act out in violence in those situations, but as an individual, I didn't have the confidence at that point
right.
to have my own ideas, my own thoughts.
Right.
And so here I am. I get put in the back of a police car. I'm looking at this individual. The police try to revive him. They're unsuccessful. The fire department comes and they try to bring him back. They can't. And the ambulance shows up, and here I am, 18, selfishly thinking, okay, here's the end of my life. I'm going to go to prison. I probably just killed somebody. And not thinking about how this person is, how their family is, what the rest of their life's going to be like, all selfish thoughts. And thank God they end up bringing me off to jail. But thank God at some point they revived that person. I've paid a lot of penance for that and I've asked for forgiveness. But
Mm.
I go through the court system and I'm able to make it out of the court system. Thankfully, this person lives and I really get by with the deal. I'm blessed with everything that happened to me. I'm able to go off to college. And at that moment was a very low point in my life. And that low point I had to personally hit to change my life and to
Right.
change my perspective and to change my direction. It doesn't mean you have to hit a low point to do that. You
Mm.
don't have to be in violence. You don't have to hit your low point to change. You just have to be willing to change and want to change. But for me, that's the bottom I had to hit. And
Right.
from that point, I knew I had to change my environment. I had to change my peer group. I had to get education. And that for me was the start of really changing my life. Um,
Mm. Wow,
so
John. So that's your life in a nutshell. That's what the episode will be definitely all about. I do want to sort of break down this story a little bit for our listeners so they have a
sure,
bit more context. Um,
sure.
you, you speak, from what I hear, you speak about your mom with so much love. It sounded like she had that very strong maternal instinct with you, and she gave you the love that maybe that a child typically would need. And from what I'm hearing as well is that your father gave love in a different way. I would like to know a little bit more about your childhood with your family, if you don't mind sharing. Firstly, could you tell me a little about did you have siblings growing up? Do you
Oh,
have any
yeah.
siblings?
Great questions. Yes. So I have two sisters. I'm the middle child. I have a sister that's older, Gina, and a sister that's younger, Roseanne. And, our childhood, there's great moments in our childhood. My mother did nourish us with that love and that care. Um,
Right.
at certain points, my dad, because of work and his profession, was gone for long periods of time. So my mother had both sides of the coin. And looking back now as a parent, I look at that and I'm so
Mm,
grateful for everything they did. For
right.
even for the things that I'm talking about now that happened with my father, it's part of the fabric of who I am today. I can't change it. So I own it and I use it kind of as a superpower, right? I feel like
Mm,
we can look back at things and go, woe is me, but what am I going to do? I can't change it. So
yeah.
I might as well own it. Um,
Right. I
and my
like that.
dad was a great provider. He provided for us. And there's a lot of things he did that his abilities allowed him to at that time when he couldn't give me the love or the affection. He did
Mm.
do other things. Yeah.
Did your dad? I mean, so your dad was born in the 1920s. He went to war. He experienced the the wartime of our world, Vietnam War and the few. So did he ever um, get diagnosed with PTSD, for example?
Oh, such a great question. So back in the day, um, there was, I don't think he ever heard of PTSD.
Right.
Yeah, but he would wake up in the middle of the night. My dad got malaria when he was in Vietnam. And so he
Mm,
would every year, like you could set your calendar by it. Certain points of the year, my dad would have these bouts that were connected to malaria. And he would have these nightmare terror dreams where he would wake up sweating and screaming. And it would go on for like a week, every night for a week, where he'd have a tremendous fever. And my dad never talked about the war with us. He never shared anything with me as definitely as a child. Only in his latter years did he ever feel
mm,
comfortable. And I know he saw a lot of horrific things there that brought him,
to
fear,
where
brought
he was.
yeah. And so I know he
Mm,
had PTSD. It just was never diagnosed
right.
as that.
It's really the thing is that it's really hard when you have become somewhat the on the receiving end of or being raised by that in that kind of environment to sort of see it on that person's perspective, not for you but maybe for some other individuals who've maybe been a victim of some kind of violence or abuse, because at the end of the day, like, they should be taking ownership for what they did, and you shouldn't be having to receive the hard end of the stick, right? But sometimes it helps to just know where they came from and what their background was that led them to those things. Not necessarily would it bring more compassion per se. Maybe for some people it would. This is one of the reasons why we share stories of individuals as well, because we want to bring a little bit of compassion to the individual's story. Because one, I can't speak for everyone again, but one generally would not turn to using violence or using certain methods, unless they themselves had experienced some kind of trauma of their own, or maybe only see the world in that kind of way, right? And so that's kind of why I asked, like, was he ever diagnosed, or did you ever recognize potentially signs that he'd gone through some of this hit on in his own life, and hence why he inflicted that on you and your siblings as well, I guess.
Yeah. So I think having empathy, and a lot of times we're not privy to that person's story, right? We have no idea. We just know the interaction that we've had with that person. And maybe we can walk away with a negative feeling, like, but we don't know. So I always try to have empathy, especially through what I've been through in my life, the different interactions I've had with people. I always try to look on the brighter side and go, look, if people took a snapshot of who I was, a soul snapshot of who I was when I was 19, 20, they can go, that guy's a jerk. That guy has no
Mm,
idea. But hopefully we've had an evolution, right? And we all
right.
are at different paces. So
Yeah.
I always try to have compassion. I always try to have empathy. I'm
Yeah.
not perfect, right? And sometimes it takes a while to have that, but that I
Yeah.
that's my goal.
Yeah, 100%. I think I remember reading in this book as well this one time about how it was talking about how we evolved as well in terms of like the way we tell stories.
Mhm.
Um, Back in the day when they used to have propaganda, it used to be about serving your country, serving your community. It was all about like you being a stellar individual if you sacrifice yourself for your community and for your country. But we have slowly then started to move towards this different narrative now where, you know, every individual's story is important. So even when they're trying to talk about, fighting war for your country, they change the whole narrative to be like, this is John, this is his story, and this is what's led him to, serve his country because of the pride that he feels, because of, the experiences that he's had, his identity. And I think a lot of people can kind of relate to that on a much deeper level, as opposed to just it being a wider scheme of a picture.
Mhm.
um and you see, there is also this generational thing where, our the older generation, they didn't think so much about their own individual, simply because of how it was, what the narrative was back then. It was
Right.
about serving your country. It was about, doing something for the greater good. But the impact is so different when you talk about the individual story and their individual purpose and their impact that they can make to the world. So yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the sort of the way it is, I
I
guess,
never
right?
thought about it in that perspective. It's a great light to shine on it because I do gravitate towards individual threads of the fabric of who a person is, and we can relate to that. We see
Yeah.
that a little bit in us, right?
Yeah.
There is a power to the whole group thing. Like you're in a concert, you're in this big group thing, and you become part of supporting a team or enjoying this concert, this music together. But it's the individual lyrics of the song you're listening to that you go, man, that I relate to that in my life or whatever that connects us, right? That bond. So I never
Yeah.
thought about that. Great
Yeah, it's
shining a
really
light on that
interesting.
for sure.
So I want to know a little bit about your father. You mentioned a little bit that he raised your sister and you a little bit different.
Mhm.
And you talked about how a lot of it was due to you being a male, them being female. So the expectation was quite different. Can you just give me some scenarios or examples where you felt like you were being treated differently?
Oh, 100%. I had these things. It's crazy how things kind of imprint on your mind. And my dad would rightfully say, like, I would go, how come I have to mow the lawn, put the garbage out, clean this stuff, and the girls get to sit and watch TV? And he goes, because you're the man of the house and you're going to learn how to be a man. I remember, and this is crazy. It's so insignificant now, but it meant so much to me at that point. My older sister had a boyfriend. My dad had a truck, and I wanted to utilize a truck to haul some stuff, to do some work. And he would never let me use the truck. And so he's like, "You can't use the truck." And then he allowed at the dinner table, my sister's boyfriend was over and asked to use if he could use the truck. And my dad said, "Of course, you can use the truck anytime." And I felt in that moment so small and insignificant. I was like, he doesn't even
Mm,
love me enough to allow me to use the truck. And I want to do some work with it. And it really hit home to me, right? Really unimportant now, but at that moment it was. And then he would let my sisters drive the truck. So I felt this isolated way out. And I never got an answer for why that was. It was just things were different for me. And little things
mm,
like that would start to build. And it would, that's where anger started being created. I'm like, why do I have to do this, or why? And
mm.
it was his own personal reasoning to do it, but the way it struck with me, I wish we had more communication, right?
Yeah, for
Other than
sure.
just do this because. And him
Yeah,
being Army colonel, it was like, do this because, and don't question why I'm asking you something. So we never had a
right.
conversation about why, right?
Mm. I just imagine that being really difficult for you when it's something like this, when you're in a situation like this, like why does this person get to do it and why can't I? And it that feeling of insecurity and significance all
Yeah,
kind of tying in. Um, yeah, it's just really different when you're an adult in the workplace and you're being told you just got to do it because you got to do it versus being a child who's naturally inclined to be curious to be told no, that there's no question allowed.
I love that. And you know what? As an adult, sometimes when I'm dealing, there's situations where we just got to do this now. It's urgent. Someone's down. We got to help them, whatever. But as a coach and as a father, number one, as a father with my kids who are 8 and 10, um, I tell them, I want you to ask questions. There is no
Yeah.
stupid question. I want you
Yeah.
to be inquisitive. You're going to maybe teach me something, right?
Yeah.
From the mouths of babes, there's so much to be learned. Maybe I didn't see it from that perspective, right? Maybe I'm
Mm,
having this big this big perspective, and you have this granular perspective, and I'm going to learn something. As a coach, I always preface, I'm going to have you do things, and there never won't be a reason why, and there is no stupid question. I want you
mm,
to ask. Um,
yeah.
I'm big into jujitsu. I've been in martial arts since I was a kid, and we're always learning new things. And a lot of times it comes from the beginner because we
Right.
we have a different perspective. We're looking at it a different way. So please
Exactly.
ask questions, be inspired, and I want to give an environment of people to ask questions.
For sure. And that probably also stems from you being shut down so much when you were young that you're like, I'm just going to do exactly the opposite now.
Yeah. 100%,
Yeah.
100%, and that's why I go, I'm grateful for the things that happened to me because they happened to me for a reason. So now I have a 180-degree turn from where that was, and maybe I
Mm,
go too far sometimes. Maybe I hug people too much or say I love you too much,
yeah.
but definitely a difference, right?
Yeah, definitely. So you also mentioned a little bit about
Mhm,
violence being a part of your childhood.
mhm.
Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Sure. So I was a small kid. Okay, I was 4'11" as a freshman in high school. I was one of the smallest kids in school. My mother is a staggering 5 foot, and we have a picture of the first day of school, and she's hugging me, and she towers over me. So I was a small kid. All these kids had gone through puberty, and I'm like, what happened, to everybody? You got
Mm,
mustaches? I'm sitting here still
yeah.
playing with baseball cards. And so I experienced bullying, and it's the reason I got into martial arts. Some of it was deserved because I was a little kid with a big mouth, but I've experienced bullying, and then all of a sudden, my sophomore to junior year in high school, I grew to be 6 foot. It was like a freak of nature. My dad was only 5'8", so I grew to be 6 foot. And in my mind, I was like, okay, I had anger already manifesting in me from my relationship with my dad. I got picked on and bullied. I got beat up. And now I started training, and I was like, oh, it's going to be payback time. And so, right? Crazy. And then I had a peer group when we got together. The dynamic was I got in so many fights by the time I was 18. There was violence that spilled off into the streets. There's multiple times we had this sick one upmanship of you inflicted violence on someone, you knock someone out, I have to one up you. It is almost like a pack
Mm,
mentality. that I
Right.
experienced were that's was our identity. My identity became that of I went from being picked on to having the identity of being a tough guy, and that filled my ego. And the more that I did, the more love I got in the sense of filling my ego, people respecting me.
Mm.
And it was this snowball momentum where now I was known as being a guy that could fight, and people would come and get me if they had trouble, and I would help them. And I didn't even know what the situation was or the trouble was. I was just fulfilling my role of what I thought it was to be labeled this tough guy. Um,
Mm.
and so one incident after another, we were always going out. There was always a violent act. And I don't say this with any type of pride. I don't say this. I'm saying this in retrospect of what the reality was. And I mean, it's crazy. It's in my book, and it's going to seem like this is a farce, but there were bats involved. There was a chainsaw involved in violence. There was stuff that you would only see in movies that was crazy. And it kept culminating until I had to hit my rock bottom. And I don't think if I didn't hit that rock bottom there, that it would have manifested maybe until adulthood to me. And
Mm.
so I got an identity that was being fed by this identity. But in my soul, Jenica, in my heart, while these things were happening in my physicality, my soul was hurting. My heart was hurting because I knew there had to be something better. I started training in martial arts. We're supposed to be protectors. And I had this
Mm.
conflict going on continually. And I had anger, and I had anger with myself about doing things. And I didn't have the whereabouts to pull myself out of there on my own. I didn't have the
Mm.
strength to do that.
Right. Wow, that's really intense. When when you were feeling this way, maybe to an extent there was this um pride in that people were turning to you, coming to you. You felt the sense of respect. But also knowing that it was out of fear, like you were no longer the fearful person, but you are now the fearing person, right?
Yes,
um and in a sense it was like, okay, now I've gained that control back into my life. Like, I've got the power now, I've got that control, I can, do whatever and say whatever and get away with it. But you also mentioned that you knew deep down inside you weren't happy with the way that you were kind of evolving. Did you ever get vulnerable with anyone and tell anyone about how you were feeling? Did you talk to your mom about it? You mentioned that your mom was really loving, a loving figure for you.
I didn't. Man, I wish I could have. I didn't. I didn't have as an individual. I didn't have the confidence to do that. It was seen as
Mm.
weakness. And the great words you put to it, I got the respect from what was happening, and I had the pain inside about what was happening. And for me, it doesn't mean listen. Maybe if somebody had verbally offered a ear for me to talk to, maybe I would have had the courage to do that. I don't know because it didn't happen, but I can just tell you that I had to literally there was a death threat on my life that happened at
Mm.
19 because I got in an altercation and somebody said that they were going to kill me, and I believed them, and I really thought it was going to happen. And in 2 weeks I packed my bags and I left my hometown, and I, without telling people why, I had $300 to $500 in my pocket. I called a friend in California. I said, I have to leave this environment. I'm either going to die or I'm going to end up in jail. And he said, I don't have room for you, but you can sleep on my floor. And I packed my bags. The first time in my life at 20, 21 years old, my father at the airport called me son. He said, son, I love you. And it crushed me. It was the first time I'd
Mm.
heard that. And I left and I went, slept on someone's floor. And, and I started a new life. And my life changed there. And it changed pretty rapidly. I went from not having the courage to verbalize what was going inside to um, I took a test to be a trainer. We're going way back, like 1994, and there was like one test available, and I literally was passed in certain grades in high school because they didn't want to see me again. I was a horrible student. I had dyslexia. I didn't know. Um, I got this identity also of like being smart is stupid and all this stuff. And I started changing that in college. I started changing that after that incident with the fight. When I got to California, I was sleeping on my buddy's floor. I took a test to be a trainer. I found literally my passion and my vocation, and it was all across the table about helping people.
Oh.
Because I didn't understand at the time, but when I started helping people, I was healing myself.
Hmm.
I thought I was helping them, they were helping me.
Yeah. Yeah. That there was so much more happening inside of you that was churning inside of you without realizing it, but it was there and it was like, wow, I can channel this anger in so many better ways, in so many more helpful, useful ways where I can still be respected. I can still be loved. People can still turn to me, but now they can turn to me out of love as opposed to out of fear.
Yes. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I started having respect for myself.
Mm.
And,
Yeah.
when I was helping people, as I said, I started healing my soul. I started helping myself, and I started going, man, in the world, I'm a personal trainer, and like at that time, I understood it as I'm getting this person ready for the wedding, whatever it is, and they lose this weight. But I'm going on this journey with them, and I'm learning
Mm.
about why they do things. I'm learning about their life. They're sharing with me. I'm sharing with them. I'm now invested wholeheartedly in seeing them succeed, right?
Mm.
Their success then becomes my success. And I'm so tied to them, so tethered to them. And then the
Yeah.
more people I helped, the more they would talk about it. And the more my life just manifested in a different way, the more my business manifested in a different way. And before you know it, on a day to day where I used to be immersed in fear and I used to be immersed in having this identity of being feared and respect, I got immersed in this identity of I'm now the person that can help people. I'm now the person
Mm.
that has an ear that will listen. Um,
Yeah.
and it literally changed my life because someone reached out a hand and said, "You can sleep on my floor."
Imagine.
Yeah.
It's like paying it forward. It's like somebody is extending love and care for you in a turbulent time where you really feel all alone. Or in
Mm,
a sense, you have people around you, you have people coming to you, but they're coming to you for the wrong reasons. And so even though you might be surrounded by people, you still feel so, so deeply alone. And then somebody comes in and like genuinely shows care. It's like, I care for your well-being. I care for your life. I don't want you to go through any pain. So
right.
let me take you in. And
Right.
that one moment just like turned everything around. What was this before or after you experienced incarceration?
This was after. So this was after that happened at 18, 19. I was living in upstate New York. From there, I went to college. I went through the court system. I got out of that. And then, like I said, that was my rock bottom. But in Italian, we have this term called testa dura. It means hard head. And I've been accused of that, rightfully so. And so there was after that, even though it was my bottom, it was not my bottom and end of my physical actions, but it was the start and manifestation of in being inside of me, knowing that I had to change. I actually went to college and I started getting good grades for the first time in my life. But it wasn't rock bottom. I wasn't strong enough to pull myself away from my peer groups and what was going on and what were the expectations of me at that time. My peer group had expectations, and I was there to fulfill those expectations to the highest degree. Um, Geez, I'm thinking about this. I've never verbalized this, but I'm thinking about this right now. I really pride myself on working hard and giving everything that is of me but at that time that was all there was of me that I thought, right? So I'm
Mm,
working hard to be the best imbecile I can be, to be the best violent person I
right.
can be, right?
Yeah.
That's what I knew and I didn't know to channel it in other directions. I didn't have an avenue. And when I called my buddy and he gave me that crack of light to go, you can come out here. And through that small crack that he gave me, it wasn't a guarantee that anything was going to change, but all I needed was that opportunity. And it
Right.
ended up there were still struggles. There was still a lot of struggles. There was still a lot of hard work, but I saw
Mm,
some light, and that light led me to a bigger, greater thing. It
right.
literally defined my life, and I'm in debt. I'm in debt forever for that.
Yeah.
Um, and I give thanks to that. So I try to pay it forward now, and I go, where can I be a crack of light in someone's life? Where
Mm.
can I be that little glimmer of hope that they're like, man, I was ready to give up. I was ready. I'm stuck in this, but there is this one little thing here. Maybe I'll just try this one last thing.
Yeah. Are you still in touch with that friend of yours?
I am. I'm so grateful. And
That's amazing.
his uncle, he was my age, right? So we were both 20, and his uncle, who was the person that really gave the green light, because he was living with his uncle. And his uncle is Uncle Jimmy. I give him thanks in my book. He's passed away now. But he had his own challenges. He had problems with addiction and he was fighting his own demons, but he was
Mm.
such a caring person that he would I ended up living in this house, which is crazy. I've never talked about this. It's in my book, but the house was filled with people working their way through AA that were in different parts of recovery of AA because he had gone
Right.
through AA. He had these struggles. And so he would reach out and he owned this landscaping business and he would give them jobs in landscaping or whatever to help them. Um,
Wow.
I had I had someone that was in the house with me, God bless him. I don't know where he is today, but his name was Curtis. And I had eventually graduated and moved to a room because someone moved out. And Curtis would sleep underneath the dining room table. And Curtis had just, we called it Curtis Corner. And Curtis
Wow.
had been in jail for manslaughter and he got out. And it was, I've never went and verified this, but Curtis was a little bit low functioning mentally and people took advantage of that. So he was in a situation where they took advantage of that. I'd heard that he never participated in the actual crime, but he was there. And so JJ, who was the person that let me stay at his house, took him in, got him, he had a methamphetamine problem, got him a new set of teeth, got him looking good, got him a place where he could then interview for jobs and change his life.
Wow.
This individual that paid it forward for me made an imprint now in my life where the imprint used to be violence, where the imprint used to be this identity of a tough guy, to now having an imprint of, man, you
Hmm.
may look rough to society. You may have had some faults. You may have had a history, but how can we possibly change that? How can we use your history to now make this world a better place to make you a better person?
Wow. It's just so far and so few, like, people around there, like, around the world that, do such goodness. I mean, they are willing to spend their savings. They are willing to, you know, uh, downgrade their quality of life to help someone, to really help someone, and not ask for anything in return,
Right.
not ask for much. The only thing that, from what I'm hearing, is this guy wanted to do was just change people for the better. And yeah, it's this kind of story that I feel like people really, really need to listen. That there's so many ways that you can help, like, others, um, and the impact that you make when you just do something for someone else selflessly, it's life changing. Like, that's the kind of legacy you're going to leave behind. You as a physical being may die, and the people around you will be sad, but it's that legacy that lives on forever and ever and ever. And I always
It's
tell
not
this to, yeah, I tell this to my students as well. I'm a teacher, so I tell this to my students as well. That, like, the people that we still talk about today are the people that have changed the world. We don't know these individuals, Thomas Edison and all these people that created all these wonders. You know, Mahatma Gandhi is another example. He was hated in his time. Actually, he died in the worst of conditions. He was thrown from place to place, prison to prison, getting beaten up his whole life. He never saw the fruits of his work for others. It was after he died that people until today talk about him in
right.
such wonder and amazement. And that's a selflessness that I you know want people to listen to, because when you really, really care, that impact is there and it's widespread and it's long last, forever lasting, right? Yeah.
Yeah, people can plant what you just said is a seed, right? They plant that seed. We don't know the ripple effect of it. There's a ripple effect to everything that you put out there. There's this vibration. So he planted that seed with me. He gave me a crack of light. Now I had to work, I had to change myself, I had to study, I changed my environment. But here I am, I now become a trainer. I find my vocation, I start helping people. It manifests into this it's crazy. If we go way back, okay, you probably won't remember this. I'm older than you, but I took my test to be a trainer. It started changing my life. I started helping people. I didn't even know what I was going to charge people. I paid some
Mhm.
kids to put flyers out. My phone starts ringing. I'm 21 years old. I don't even have the answers to the questions they're asking, like, how much do you charge? I would talk
Mm.
in a deeper voice because I didn't want anybody to know I was 21 when they called. And I'm like, they're going to
Right.
and
Yeah.
so my phone started ringing immediately and I started helping people. And from that, I go from this little neighborhood in 3, 4, 5 months. I'm working full time. I'm seeing people 40 hours a week. It just grew and it grew and it grew. From that little seed that he planted, giving me a room, a floor to sleep on, giving me a chance, I end up becoming a trainer that trains. I go internationally. I start working with celebrities. I move to Hollywood. I work with Grammy Award winning artists. I work with all these people. I'm on 200 flights a year traveling the world helping people. And I go from the farm town mucking horse stalls, baling hay of 2,000 people to going to violence to getting arrested to coming out with a little glimmer of hope to then traveling the world. Okay.
Mm.
This is not possible if I don't put in the work, but if somebody doesn't give me the opportunity, if somebody doesn't see a glimmer and hope in me. So if I can do that with dyslexia, if I can do that with my limited capabilities at that time, imagine what other people can do. Imagine the greatness you can manifest. Imagine the
Mm.
people you can help, right? It is all possible. The fact that I've done what I do, and listen, I'm not here. I hope I'm not in my ego tooting my horn. I just want people to see the reality of this is if I can do this and do all these things and have people in high places go, we think you are a great addition to our team. We want to hire you. We're going to pay you X amount of dollars. That if I can do that, literally everything is possible. If you can dream it, you can do it. If you're willing to put in the work,
Mm.
you can do it. And you can help a shit ton of people around on the way so they can do the same thing. And we can create this amazing wave of positive things happening.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so inspirational. And
By the way,
that's
that's the
true.
longest I've ever talked without taking a breath. I'm glad you can be part of that.
I can sense the passion in you, like, I can
Oh my
hear,
God.
like, you really come from a place of, like, this is so deep in your identity, like, this is so strongly something you believe, and yeah, that's amazing. And I like that it's something that you truly believe, and it sounds like it's something that you practice in your work as well, like, you're training your clients, and you're constantly, like, giving them these words of positivity, and as opposed to the boot camp method that your dad maybe used with you, or do you think that you use a bit of both? Do you think that there are also
I
times where, like,
do.
"No."
I think there's times where it's just like, man, there's not a lot of time for talking. We just got to move. We got to do this. We got to run. We got to do this, right?
Yeah.
Um, but there's also times, okay, what is propelling, what is fueling the engine, right? It's the mind, it's the heart, it's the soul. So
Mhm.
if as opposed to me pushing people, right, and saying
Yeah.
you have to do this, sometimes it's needed, we get momentum. But if they can have the internal drive of what their why is and understand why they're doing this and have that thread, right? I'm doing this just for example, I'm a teacher. You happen to be a teacher. I want to nourish my body with the best stuff I can put in there because it's not necessarily only for me, but when I'm teaching kids, I'm now at the highest level I can be at, and I can give them what they need. When I'm
Yeah.
in a stressful situation, I can more likely handle it and be all that I can be because I've taken the time to do breath work. I've taken the time to nourish myself. I've taken the time to give myself restful sleep, all these
Mhm.
things. So now, when challenges come, we can best handle them, and they're going to come, right? They're
Mm.
going to come. We're going to deal with some type of pain in some way. And how do we handle that? And how do we convert it to something positive?
Yeah. Can you tell me about some of those breakthroughs that you experienced in your own physical and mental and emotional and spiritual health in the healing process? when you were training others, when you were coaching, when you were helping others?
Yeah. So to see people that have come in broken, to see people that have come in where they've like, I've tried everything, or I'm so unhappy. I don't have a magic wand. I don't
Mm,
have it, but what I do have is a path, a systematic path on what is the common thread of being a human. We want to be happy, we want to be healthy, we want to have all these things. So for me, ritual is what helps me do that. I try to instill some of my rituals to people, present them to them, take what you see as useful, throw out the rest, and add your own. So breakthroughs I've had is realizing that every day for me, I get up super early because I'm a morning person and I do breath work. I don't turn on my phone. I don't turn on the computer. I don't get pulled in any other direction. I take some
mm.
time for myself and I do Wim Hof breathing every morning.
Oh God, amazing.
I
Some
love it, right?
amazing stuff there.
Talk about an
Yeah.
individual that has put something out there for free. You can get it on YouTube that has
Yeah.
changed people's lives, right? So
Yeah.
now I center myself and then I do my gratitudes, what I'm grateful for, the people that have come through my life that have really helped me, the people that have passed that have really helped me. I give them thanks. I give gratitude. For me, I'm a spiritual person. I give thanks to God. And then I do some type of physical activity that is makes me a little uncomfortable. I want to be comfortable doing uncomfortable things. I suck at swimming. So guess what? I got a coach and they taught me how to swim and I put myself in cold water and I try to do that because I want to be comfortable doing uncomfortable things, learning new things. We can
Mm,
get into this routine where we only do the same thing. I know this world and I'm comfortable here. I want to do some things that maybe other people like that I'm not used to doing that will teach me something new. And so I
mm,
do that every day before I start. So then when I am presented with a schedule of 12 people, 13 people where I'm traveling, I can go, okay, I've taken care of what I need to take care of for me, a little bit selfish, but now I can selflessly give to
mm,
you from a place of health, from a place of gratitude, from a place of me being grounded, and I can be present to say, how can I help you? What are your needs? I can open an ear and say, what are your needs and how do we together fix this, listen to this, formulate a plan together to help what's going on.
that's amazing. Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, I love that. How long did it take you to build this morning ritual, this habit of yours?
It's still being built. I'm still learning stuff, so it took a long while. Um, so I'm always learning stuff, man. My wife is amazing. She centers me. I am a very type A person, like, and I'm also have this thing where I love what I do. I get physically tired, but if I can do 10 hours, great. Why not 12? Sometimes I think, why not 14? And I can do too much. We'll
Mm,
talk about it probably, but I had something. I've been defined by my physicality for so many years, being the guy that can do X, Y, and Z, helping people. And my physicality got taken away from me. And I got an autoimmune disorder in 2021 where I became paralyzed. And I was literally in the ICU, paralyzed. I couldn't move anything but my eyeballs at one point. And so I'm always learning. I had to go, okay, now how do I use my spirit, my mind to navigate the waters of this situation where I've relied on my physicality for so long? And I had to learn new things. I had to learn that I
mm,
can't always physically will things. I have to utilize my mentality. So
mm.
if you want me to talk about that, I can talk about what happened to me.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that.
So here's a huge learning lesson for me. 2021, my family gets COVID. Okay, my kids get it. It's like a blip in the radar screen. They get over it, no
Mm,
problem. My wife gets it, same thing, much less than I get it. And now I have to quarantine, right? We have to quarantine. And
right.
it's like putting me in a cage. Like I'm so active and everything. I didn't have the respect for my own body to go, I need to back it down. So here I am, a test positive for COVID. I'm on the assault bike doing a half hour, not taking any medication, not sleeping. I'm in the house for going crazy. Well, guess what? My body, the universe was going, you might need to slow down. And it was like whispering, and then it was knocking, and then it hit me with a sledgehammer. So I get through COVID, and then I go back. I get a bacterial infection training jujitsu. I have a little cut on my shin. I have to go to hospital, bacterial infection. So I don't know if it came from COVID. I don't know if it came from the bacterial infection. but all of a sudden I can't feel my feet. My feet start going numb. I have no feeling in my feet. Through ignorance, through machismo, whatever, I don't tell anybody. I don't feel my feet. It goes on for 3, 4, 5 days. I get to a point where my feet start now going from not being able to be felt to aching so much that I'm getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm taking ice baths. It's the only thing that will relieve the pain in my feet. I'm going to work every day, 10, 12 hours. Next thing you know, a couple of days later, I can't feel my hands and my vision starts going.
And your
I,
vision too.
my vision starts getting blurry. I can't feel my hands and my feet now. My urine stream starts going, not to be graphic, but I can't pee at some points. I'm like, I can't pee.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
break down my women. I love women to death. They are so much more in tune with what we call women's intuition comes from somewhere. My wife understands something's going on. They're connected to emotions, I believe, than most guys, right?
Mm.
So she sits down with me and I tell her, I explain what's going on, and I go, look, I can't feel my feet, I can't feel my hands. I got these other things going on. I'm going to go to work today, and maybe when I get out of work, we'll go to the urgent care. My wife is like, you're not going to work today. We're going to go to urgent care. I'm going to take you down there. So she takes me down to urgent care. They start doing these tests. I explain what's going on, and I faint in urgent care. I go unconscious there, and they're able to get me back. And they go, look, I don't want to scare you, but what you're telling us and the symptoms we're seeing, you may have a rare autoimmune disorder, and it could be MS. It could be what I ended up having, which is GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome.
GBS.
Yep. G.
GBS Guillain-Barré.
Yep. Guillain-Barré
Never
syndrome.
heard of
I
it.
had never heard of it. I didn't know what it was.
Mm.
So they said, we don't have the ability to test for it here. What you need is you need to go to the hospital right down the street, and we're going to call ahead, and they need to administer a spinal tap. They're going to put a needle in your spine. They're going to draw fluid and find out if you have this.
I've heard that it's really, really painful. It's at the base of your spine, and they take out stem cells, as far as I know.
So they pulled out fluid, spinal fluid, and what they're testing for is a protein to see if you have this protein in your body. That those autoimmune disorders basically attack your own nervous system. So they're
Right.
attacking the myelin on the outer sheath of your nerves, and they're just eating away at it. They think there's something in there in that myelin that they need to protect you against, but it's actually eating away at your own.
Right.
Your nerves control your muscles, control everything. So you just keep
Right.
getting weaker and weaker. So they do the spinal tap, which actually wasn't that bad, all things considered. Maybe it was because I was losing sensation in my body. So they say it's going to be an hour for the test to come back. You have the ability. I live right near the hospital. They said you can go home if you want, but if any of these symptoms continue, you need to immediately come back in. I couldn't feel from my knees down, and I couldn't feel my hands. They go, if it ascends up your body, and it could get into your lungs and shut your lungs down, and then you would have to be put on a ventilator or you won't be able to breathe. So I'm always more comfortable in my house. So I said, let me go home. We're home for maybe 20 minutes and I feel it. Well, I don't feel I start losing sensation from my knees above. So we go back to the hospital. The test comes back and I have Guillain-Barré syndrome or MS. They know I have one of them. It's not all the way narrowed down. They put me in isolation in the ICU.
Isolation.
Yes, because I still, even though like 30 days or 20 something days, I don't remember what it was, had passed, they swabbed me for COVID and I came back positive. There were
Oh.
old COVID cells there that tested. So at that point in 2021, it ended up being a blessing, but because I got my own room in the ICU and I didn't know it, but I was preparing to do some pretty wacky stuff to get out of the ICU. So they put me in isolation in the ICU. Jenica, I went from not being able to feel my knees, my feet, now my hips, to pretty much being paralyzed. At one point, I could only move my eyeballs. The doctor was come in. I didn't even have the strength to turn my neck. And now here I am only being able to move my eyeballs and hear what's going on. This person that's defined by their physicality is now, I'm feeble in bed. I get to the point where I soil myself in the bed because I can't even get up to go to the bathroom. They're continually testing my lungs because if it ascends into my lungs, then I won't be able to breathe. They're giving me batteries of tests. It was some of the most challenging parts of my life. But on the way to wheeling me to the ICU into my own room, they had me in a wheelchair. I saw people in other rooms and I saw people that were worse than I was. And in that path to my room, I made a definitive decision that I was never going to complain. I did not know what was going to happen, but I said there is not going to be one iota in my mind of going, woe is me, or I'm going to complain. I made that decision. I said, I'm going to find a way out of here. And I know I'm grateful because I know some of these people probably won't find their way out of here. I immediately, now this may sound like mumbo jumbo to other people. I do not care. I know it wholeheartedly. It helped me. I said, I'm gonna change my environment, right? All I hear in here is sounds of agony, and I hear beeps and heart monitors. I filled the room with what inspires me. For me, that's Bob Marley. I put music on, and I'm glad I had my own room because other people would have thought I was nuts. So I started filling that room with vibrations that filled my soul. My body wasn't working, but my mind and my heart and my soul were. So I had that. In the hospital, I have also dedicated part of my existence to changing this. But the food and nourishment in the hospital is horrible. They have chicken fingers and French fries. I could no longer swallow, so they had to give me pureed food. And there's no way I'm eating pureed French fries, thinking
Yeah.
that's going to help me on a nourishing cellular level to get out of
Mm.
here. So my wife, she had the idea. She goes, she went home. She started pureeing me organic foods, bringing them back to me. So now I'm getting nourishment on a cellular level from foods, the best we can get. My whole music is going in my mind. In my mind, I started praying. I started having mantras and envisioning my body healing itself. Now, I am not taking away from Western medicine. I am super grateful for everything every nurse and doctor did. They administered me with medicine. They gave me what is called IVIG. It's immunoglobulin to try to slow my own body attacking itself. I know that helped, but I started praying and envisioning my body healing itself. I started asking it to heal itself. I started politely demanding until I got to the point where mentally I was demanding my cells to heal themselves and to stop attacking my nerves. If it did nothing, it kept my mind occupied on something positive as
Mm.
opposed to going, why am I here? This is horrible. I can't move. It occupied my mind. And so I tried to secure every facet, my mentality. I started to secure my surroundings. I start to secure my nourishment with my food. And man, there were some low moments, right? I,
Yeah.
I fainted. They took me to do MRIs and stuff, and my wife was there, and I coded out. I went unconscious, and I didn't have the ability to stand or anything. And my wife
Mm.
heard the code go throughout the ICU, and she knew it was me. So there were some low moments. I couldn't pee anymore. They had to put catheters in me, and do all these things that were, maybe because of my ego or whatever, but they were emasculating. Like I can't go to the bathroom anymore on my own. I can't
Mm.
walk. So even though I wasn't feeling pity for myself, there were tough moments. And it wasn't without its challenges. But I can tell you this, I was super grateful for every nurse that walked the threshold of my door. And I made a decision to learn about them. I asked everybody, they're probably like, this guy wants to know so much and ask so many questions, but I wanted to know, like, where do you come from? How long have you been a nurse? Do you have kids? I wanted to put it on the other
Mm.
side of the table because these people were helping me.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm such a crybaby now.
No. Such a
And
personal journey.
after 10 days, I started to recover. I started to get some movement back. You have no idea, like they put me in a wheelchair in the shower and how, like, just the gratefulness of feeling water on me was awesome. It was the best shower
Mm.
I've ever taken. After 10 days, I was able to leave the ICU. They put me in a regular hospital, and then I was able to leave the hospital in a wheelchair. And I said, I am gonna go after this thing. I don't know. I never heard of GBS, but I said, I know who I am. I know that I'm surrounded by love. I know I'm surrounded by a support system, and I'm gonna work as hard as I can to beat this thing. And so I
Mm.
started going to physical therapy 5 days a week. And then I did another 2 days on my own. And I would do it like several times a day. At first, it was like, okay, can I get out of this wheelchair, use a walker to just walk over to the couch? Can I move my toes? Can I squeeze my hands? Whatever it was, I was doing it. Like I was
Mm.
trying to do whatever I could. And so 7 days a week, I started doing therapy. I graduated from the wheelchair to the walker. Then I graduated from a walker to a cane. And then I eventually graduated from a cane to walking on my own or scooting around. I was scooting around in an office chair because I could only, but I was not going to stop. I was going to do everything in my power to do this. And after like 3 months, I got like 90% of my physicality back. And I was out of work for 3 months. And I made a decision also that this wasn't happening to me, but it was happening for me. And I got inspired. I had started writing certain things down when I was on tour with artists, like stories of my life, and I didn't know where they would come in. And I got the
Mm.
inspiration because I was out of work, because I no longer had my physicality. I was listening to a book, and I got the inspiration from this book. And I said, I need to put this down on paper, and I need to see how these circumstances that I've gone through can help other people. And
Mm.
you're talking to a person that has dyslexia, can't write. I spell so bad that when I type something on the keyboard, spell check is like, we have no clue trying to write. We have no
Like how to
success.
recommend you.
I have no My recommendation is go back to school. That's what the recommendation. So I was listening to a book and I'm like, I need to put this on paper. I need to
Mm.
write this down. So I contacted the person of the audiobook that I was listening to, this guy named Richard Bressler that did a jujitsu book. And I know Richard. And he put me in touch with a guy who's helped him with his book because Richard doesn't write. This guy named Scott Burr. And I call him out of the blue. And I'm like, man, this has happened to me. I've started writing some stuff and I would love for you to read it. I don't know what this is going to be. I don't know what it is, but I have this. I want to take it as an opportunity to help people. And he gets back to me so gracious and he goes, listen, I just got done writing this book. I'm so exhausted. I don't want to do another book right now. I'm having time off, but he left me a crack and he goes, send me what you've written. Send me one thing you've written. And so he gave me that little crack of light.
Yeah.
And I sent him something that I wrote. It was about me getting arrested and going to jail. And so he gets right back to me and he calls me. He says, send me something else. And so I send him something else and it's from the hospital. And he calls me back and we have a conversation. Thank God. And he goes, I was not going to do a book. I was not going to do another book. I'm exhausted. But I love what you've put down. And I think this can help people. And so we collaborate and I write a book and I've never written anything. And I have
Mm.
dyslexia and we do an audio book and we put it out and it becomes an instant number one new release on Amazon. People start
Wow.
calling me from across the nation that have read the book that have GBS or their mom has
Mm.
GBS and they're like, we've been inspired by your book. Would you talk to my mother? She's 70 years old. She has GBS. She's in the hospital.
Right.
If I don't take the
Mhm.
opportunity to do that and turn this around, if I don't have that crack of light,
Mm.
all I have is a bunch of pain that I went through, and I keep it to
Mm.
myself. So now we can use this to help other
Yeah.
people.
It's like universe's way of working for you again, like you said, instead of to you, right?
Yeah.
And it was like really changing that mindset from inside the moment you said, it's nothing is happening to me, everything is happening for me, is when the whole universe just conspired to give that to you in a way, right?
Like, if it was crazy, normal, crazy me, like, I'd be working out and my day would be filled. I would never have the time to sit down
Mm,
and write this. I would never have the time to have this introspect. So your original question went back and said, what is something that you have learned or put into your routine or whatever? So this journey has taught me so much to go, really, everything can be a blessing. Everything can be a
mhm.
blessing if you really look at it and you want to turn it into that. And
I
we
love
can do
that.
so much as individuals. But if we have and surround ourselves with a team of people that are caring, that will lift us up, may not necessarily agree with everything you're saying. I don't need everybody to agree with what I'm saying. They may give me a different point of view that may change my perspective. They will hold
Mm,
me accountable. But I had to have people, number one, this other brave individual had to write a book about his life, and I had to listen to it. He had to be willing to take my phone call. He had to be willing to go, okay, I know you've never written a book and all this stuff, but I'm going to be brave enough to give you this guy's number. That person, Scott Burr, had to listen to me. Take so as a collective, if we work together, if you don't have this podcast, right? If you don't come
mm,
home from working a long day as a teacher and be willing to still listen to someone and put this out there, maybe someone listens to our message a year from now,
mm.
minus all the static and everything else, and they get inspired. And what is that individual going to do? I don't know, but I know it can be great. I know it
Mm,
can change. I know it can have effect long behind their lifespan.
I love that. I was about to actually ask, like, what kind of message would you like to get across to our listeners? But I feel like you've already beautifully sort of just like brought that in within your story too. There's so many like little messages that we can take away. But I do want to ask one question, and we'll wrap up this interview because I feel like yeah, like you sort of just like wrapped the whole story in this beautiful little gift box for our listeners, with a wonderful little message there for our listeners. But what would you say to those individuals that might be stuck in this rut, maybe surrounded by people that are throwing a lot of negativity or negative messages to them? You know, you can be in the workplace and you're not being given the validation for the work that you're doing, or you have a toxic workplace or a relationship that's not really working for you and it's really negative, or a bad place at home, like, family relationship is not great, or you feel alone and you feel like every corner you turn, you're just hitting a brick wall. What can you say to those individuals about finding that resilience? And I know, like, it sounds like you did feel that at some point. You were just hitting brick walls over and over again, and you did find that rock bottom. You did end up in prison because you were so angry. You ended up in hospital where you couldn't move. It was like negativity being thrown at you one after another. Ho Do you think, like, is this would you say, like, it's an innate thing that a person just is innately positive, or what is it that a person needs to do to turn that mindset around?
First thing, that's such a great question. And, I think we're all innately human. Okay. There are fabrics that tie us all together. I want people to know you're not alone. You're not alone in this. We may feel so isolated at some points. In my life, many times I've felt like isolated. I've felt, woe is me. Understand that there are other people out there. So,
Mm,
what I did is I had to change my environment. Okay. I changed my environment helped change my mentality. Now, it doesn't have to happen in that order, but this is my journey. I changed my environment, it changed my mentality. That mentality then changed my actions. And I started going outside of myself, where it was all about woe is me, what's happening to me, to now, how do I help? How do I be of service? The second I started doing that, I started getting back tenfold my life changing. So I know we can feel
mm,
alone, we can feel isolated, but if you can have the courage to surround yourself with people that will help you, the courage that these other people, we are all broken in some aspect. We all have gone through things. Understand there's no perfection, and you don't have to hold shame over what your past is. You don't have to hold shame over what has happened to you. just know that we can change only what's going to happen. We have to
Mm.
own what has happened, use it as your superpower, right? What has happened to you in the past, you can't change. Use it as your superpower. It's a thread of who you are. And let's go ahead and work towards changing what's coming ahead, towards
Mm.
manifesting beauty. It's very easy to just say simple words that can absolutely have a ripple effect, like, I love you. I hear you. I understand, right? Just as we can say a negative word that can change someone's life. Take yourself. You're not alone. Work one step at a time to doing something positive. Do one thing and start building momentum, and then do two things. And I guess
Mm.
I'm getting a little wordy here, but the last thing I can tell someone that's feeling alone that wants to know is have compassion for yourself as you would for other people. Have patience for yourself as you would for other people. And through that, you can grow. You can do anything.
Mm.
You can achieve anything. And the beauty that you are going to manifest is different than mine, but it is innately unique to you, and you can do it.
I love it. John, thank you so much for, sharing your story, being vulnerable with us today, and yeah, giving us so much insight and perspective on the beauty of life.
Thank you for having me. Without your platform, I wouldn't be here to get this message out. And if we help one person together, Jenica, I feel like I have done my job, and it is, just fuels my life.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow and subscribe. You can rate and review your feedback on any of our platforms listed in the description. I'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and open to share their life experiences with us. Thank you for showing us we're human. Also, a thank you to our team who worked so hard behind the scenes to make it happen.
Chris Trzynski, Stefan Menzel.
The show would be nothing without you. I'm Jenica, host and writer of the show, and you're listening to Multispective.